The HOA built 58 houses on my land. Not beside it, not near it, right on top of it. They bulldozed through my meadow. They tore up the survey stakes my father had planted half a century ago. And when they reached the pond I built with my own hands for my late wife Maggie, they dropped a dozer blade through the dam like it was nothing. In an hour, they drained the only piece of her I had left. Their president, a smug lawyer named Karen O'Connell, looked me straight in the eye and told me I was powerless. She thought she could bury me under paper and concrete. But what she didn't know was that she had built her shiny new neighborhood on a floodplain, and I was the one who still held the water back. My name is Jack Delaney. I'm 67 years old, retired from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers after 4 decades of building dams, levees, and bridges around the world. I came back here to Tennessee to the only place that ever felt like home, 48 acres of pine and hickory tucked behind a ridge. My grandfather bought it after the war. My father raised me here, and when Maggie got sick, I rebuilt an old stone dam to form a pond so she could float weightless, free from the pain of chemo. That pond was her sanctuary, and after she passed it, became mine. The trouble started with a glossy envelope, the Glades at Willow Creek, a new luxury community. Karen O'Connell, their HOA president, wrote about shared values and rising property values, then slipped in a request an easement across the low side of my land for their storm runoff. Just a formality, she said. I mailed back one sentence. No thank you. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, Karen called me herself. Her voice was smooth, lawyer slick, but there was steel underneath. She said her engineers insisted my land was their only drainage option. I told her they were wrong. She chuckled low and condescending. Mr. Delaney, you don't seem to understand. This is a multi-million-dollar development. A small ditch won't stand in its way. I hung up, but the next Monday the sound of diesel engines shook me awake. I walked to my property line and watched bulldozers tearing into my meadow on my side. A foreman in a clean hard hat waved a clipboard in my face and said a new survey showed this land belonged to the HOA. He had papers stamped and signed. Official, but all lies. By the time I could blink, they were grading roads, laying sewer lines, hammering frames. The day they came for the dam, something inside me froze. I stood on the bank, yelling at the dozer operator. He shrugged, pointed to his boss, and lowered the blade. Stones and earth I had set with my own hands crumbled into the water. The pond drained away, leaving nothing but stinking mud. I had spent a year building it. They erased it in minutes. I hired a lawyer. For 2 weeks I believed I had a case. Then he called me back, his voice nervous. Karen had leaned on him. She'd threatened complaints to the state bar, endless motions, financial ruin. He dropped me. The county clerk shrugged and told me the HOA had filed an uncontested easement, one I was never notified of. Too late to challenge, she said. Powerless, that word echoed everywhere. That evening I walked the ruins of Maggie's pond. Amid the mud I spotted something, her old, faded blue float ring crushed under a tire track. I picked it up, cold plastic in my hand, and felt a hollow silence settle over me. For a moment I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I should just sell and leave. Who was I to fight a machine this big? But as I stood there staring at what was left of Maggie's water, I remembered something else. I wasn't just a tired old man. I was an engineer, and the truth was written beneath their feet. In my workshop, I dug out my grandfather's original surveys. One of them was a 1913 flood map showing the entire basin, the very land Karen's development now sat on, marked as seasonal floodplain. For 100 years, the little dam had held the water back. Now they'd torn it out. Their multi-million-dollar houses were nothing but targets waiting for a storm. That realization should have been enough, but fate handed me more. My cousin Benny, a retired hydrologist, showed up with his drone. He calls it the truth teller. We flew LiDAR scans, overlaid them on the old maps, and proved the HOA had not only built illegally on my land, but dumped construction waste into my property. Then came the final nail, an anonymous email with a forwarded chain. Karen's own engineer had warned her about the floodplain. Her response: worst case, we deal with some water. Best case, the old man sells or dies before it's an issue. Or dies. I read it again and again. It wasn't just theft, it was calculated disregard for human life. They had gambled that I would disappear and they could steal the land cheap. My grief turned to cold steel. Still doubt crept in. After county inspectors came snooping called in by HOA complaints about unsafe wiring in my workshop, I felt the weight of it all. I drove to Maggie's grave and whispered, "Maybe I can't win. Maybe I should let them have it." For the first time, walking away seemed like mercy. But when I got home, my neighbor Ed Marin was waiting. Old Vietnam vet, raspy voice, steady eyes. He handed me a heavy valve handle and said, "Don't let them talk you to death, Jack. Fix that dam. Just make sure it's not you who breaks it." Then he walked off into the dark. That was the push I needed. I rebuilt the dam not the old way, but stronger with steel and concrete and a hidden sluice gate triggered by a single switch. No complex electronics, just gravity and pressure. For days, I worked alone, rain swelling the pond again behind my new design. By the time the dam was ready, the sky was already darkening. When the storm came, it was biblical. Inches of rain, an hour, creeks overflowing. From my workshop, I watched pressure gauges climb. Benny's drone hovered over the glades, showing streets turning to rivers, storm ponds, failing basements filling with water. On screen, Karen screamed orders at her crew, soaked hair plastered to her face. Benny's voice came through the static, "Your call, cousin. Basements are already drowning." I thought of her email or dies. I flipped the switch. There was no explosion, just a deep metallic clunk as the pins released. Then the gate gave way and water surged, not wild but controlled, directed by gravity down the basin where it always belonged. It split across cul-de-sacs, filled the illegal foundations, and turned half their development into a churning lake. Not one legal house outside the floodplain was touched. From above, it looked like nature itself reclaiming her course. The drone caught it all. The sales agents stranded on porches, the landscapers scrambling uphill, and Karen herself floundering in mud, screaming about lawsuits, calling me a terrorist. No one listened. The only witness was the silent eye of the truth-teller. That night, I sent the files everywhere: city officials, state agencies, local news, and the HOA's own Facebook group. I posted it under the caption, "They didn't have a water problem. They had a truth problem." The fallout was immediate. News ran with the story. Homeowners panicked, questions erupted. Karen tried to spin it, called a public HOA meeting to paint me as an eco-terrorist. But I showed up with Benny with Ed with evidence. I plugged in a USB and put everything on the screen: maps, drone footage, dumping photos, and finally her email. Or dies. The room fell silent. Then the shouting started, not at me, but at her. Homeowners, furious they'd been lied to, cheated, put in danger. Ed's gravelly voice cut through, "I move for no confidence. Remove the board." The vote was unanimous. Karen's power evaporated in an instant. Security escorted her out as the crowd roared. That's where my story ends, not with a celebration, not with fireworks, but with justice. She built her empire on lies, and water washed it away. The lesson is simple. You can pave over land, you can bully with paper, but you can't bury the truth forever.